Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. And Elijah said unto them, take the prophets of Baal, and let not one of them escape. And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon, and slew them there. Elijah said, get thee up, eat, drink, and there is a sound of an abundance of rain. So Ahab went to eat and drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel and cast himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees and said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. And it came to pass that the 7th time that he said, behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea like a man's hand. And he said, go up and say unto Ahab, prepare thy chariot and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. And it came to pass in the meanwhile that the heavens were black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Elijah heard something that nobody else could see, and nobody else was hearing. They were consumed with the drought. Many people were praying for the drought to end, for the famine to end. Let me tell you something. If you can get yourself into a place that you hear what God has to say about your condition, you're not going to pray for the drought. The drought will take care of itself when the famine will take care of itself when the drought is dealt with. So we have to start praying not for the drought. We have to start praying for what God's saying that is the solution to the drought. But you can't pray the solution to the drought if you're not hearing in the Spirit. So what was taking place here, God was actually speaking from spirit to spirit. How do I know that? Because when you see Elijah getting into a place that he's now putting his head between his knees, what he's actually doing here is he is closing out everything that he's hearing that's around him so he can focus more on what he's hearing in him. Look, this is where the enemy comes and beats us up, is we hear something in our spirit. Every time we get spiritual, every time we get into the presence of God, we hear something. But the moment that we pull out of the presence of God, we start hearing everything else that's going on around us. And what happened is that God placed his sound inside of Elijah, and that was resonating every time he began to enter into the realms of the Spirit. He could hear the sound of abundance of rain. This is why he went into a position of closing his ears so that he could only hear what's in him. When you're praying, you don't need to be praying with the interference of everything that's around you. All the naysayers and all the words that people have spoken, all the issues that you've been dealing with, all the problems that's going on around you. If you're allowing that to influence your prayer life, you're really not praying the way you need to pray. I'm not capable of doing it, what God's put inside of me. God would have never put anything inside of you if he didn't think you were capable of dealing with it or handling it. Amen. Somebody say, I hear the sound of abundance of rain. It's about to rain. It's about to rain in your life. Come on now. But we've got to put aside the idols. We've got to put aside the graven images. We've got to put aside those things that we put before God. If I can't put those things down, if I can't separate, then what I'm doing is I'm telling God that that's more important to me than you. I have to put aside the rejections. I have to put aside people that are talking about me, people that are angry with me. I've got to put that aside in order to keep him first. Because if I keep the anger first, if I keep those people first, then what I'm saying to God is that's more important to me to get my revenge back than what you are. Elijah is now what theologians say is in a birthing position. Old timers would say when somebody is about to give birth, have they gotten down yet? Have they gotten down yet? And what they're referring to, because in those times, they didn't have hospitals, emergency rooms, all these various different things, but they had a birthing stool that they would sit down on. And so we think, what is a man doing in a birthing position? It's because he heard a sound and he was pregnant with something that he had to give birth to. Because without giving birth to it, it could never come into existence. So when you start looking at the role or the methods in which Elijah went forth, he had to block out everything that was contrary to what he was hearing on the inside. And there's times we have to block out what everybody else is saying that's contrary to what we know on the inside. And so we have to get ourselves in a position that we can literally begin to birth a thing. Somebody say, I got to push this thing out. There's something inside each and every person. Now, if you haven't heard from the Lord, if God has not put a sound inside of you, if he's not spoken something to you, then this message is not going to mean anything to you. But if you've ever heard God say something to you, and in the moment of your quiet time, or your marriage might be all messed up, tore up, but every time you get in your prayer closet, there's something inside of you that's saying, this thing's going to work, this thing's going to happen, I'm going to make it happen, but I've got to give birth to something, or your children are not living right, and all of a sudden you're getting in your prayer closet and you know that what is happening around you is not what God's saying about the situation. Am I making sense of what I'm saying? So every time you get alone and you start praying, that sound starts resonating inside of you, then God has spoken to you to give birth to something. This is interesting because he says to his servant, go and tell me what you see. I think that you got to surround yourself with people that when you're in the stage of birthing something, that there will be people that can go get things or go assess things, go look at things and come back and give you the truth about it. And instead of having yes people, you got to have people around you that can tell you the truth about a situation. And 6 times he went out and he brought back a word that says, ain't nothing happening. I don't know what you're doing, but ain't nothing happening. And he sends him out the 7th time. He says, I want you to go one more time. I want you, because there's something that I'm pushing. There's something that I'm pushing on that's going to manifest itself, and I want you to see what I'm hearing. Oh my goodness, man. I don't know about y'all, but if you start looking at these Indians that were doing rain dances, come on. And if you really grab a hold of what I'm saying, you might become a rainmaker yourself. You might become, I'm at the stage in life that if you can't make rain, I don't need to be hanging around. I need to be around people that understand how to make rain also. I can't afford to be around people that's just asking for rain. I need to be around people that know how to make some rain. Come on now. So Elijah says to him on the 7th time, I want you to go out. And he comes back and he says, I see a cloud, and it's about the size of a man's hand. Now, I've read some things about birthing. And it says that in birthing, when the head begins to come forth, they call it crowning. In other words, the crown of the head begins to emerge. Now, when that begins to happen, there has to be a change in your approach. So you're no longer having to push the way you've been pushing. Elijah says, I want you to go out and I want you to look to see what's taking place. And he says, I see a cloud. There's something happening. In other words, something has now been released from the womb of heaven that you've been pushing on, and I see a hand. It's the size of a man's hand. In other words, it's not God's hand. The word says that God is finished what he's going to do. He says, but I see something coming out of heaven that looks like a man's hand. Now, Elijah changes position. And he's no longer having to push because there's been a breakthrough. There's a breakthrough that's about to take place in your life if you can hear what God is saying and you start pushing on that. There has to be some intensity when you begin to push. Go tell me what you see. I don't see anything. I got to push a little bit harder. Go see what's out there. I don't see anything. Well, I got to push a little bit differently and push a little bit harder. And he never got up from the pushing or the birthing position until he heard a breakthrough has taken place and a cloud about the size of a man's hand has broke through the womb. That told him he was home free. And that baby was coming forth. What baby? The rain. The answer to the drought. Because once it started, the drought was over. And the famine took care of itself after the answer came. How were you praying? Because this is a key here in how we need to pray. Well, I've got a great marriage, but I've got kids that have problems. You know, there's all kinds of things. Everybody deals with a drought or a dry area. I don't care who you are. It's interesting how that some people think that a person that has great talent is talented in every area of their life. They're not talented in every area of their life. But the assumption is because we see them successful in one area, we think that they're successful in every area, and that's not necessarily true. You can quote scripture and have a horrible marriage. You can have a great marriage and your children be in trouble. You can have your children great, but your marriage be in trouble. You can sing the greatest and not know how to handle finances. So a person that gets up and singing, you say, man, that's great talent, but they're broke, busted, disgusted all the time. Because they don't know how. There's a drought. There's a famine in that area. Every person, I don't care who you are, every person, no matter how talented you are in one area, there's an area in your life that's dry. And the only way to have a breakthrough in the dry areas of your life is to hear a sound from God that says there's an abundance of rain. Elijah heard that in his spirit. He didn't see that in the natural. He heard it in his spirit. The deep things calls unto the deep. The deep calleth unto the deep. The Spirit of God was calling to the spirit of Elijah to hear a sound that was contrary to what the situation was. Many, many times God speaks in the famine. So whatever famine or dry area in your life, listen, because God's speaking in that dry season of your life. And if you can reposition yourself, if you can get ready for it, and then reposition. Look, He spoke to Ahab and says, get up, eat, drink, and get things prepared. In other words, you got to prepare yourself for what's about to happen. Then Elijah begins to do a transformation within himself. He wasn't pacing up and down praying. He wasn't. He put himself in a position that he was not influenced by outward speech, but he would only listen to what was on the inside, because he knew what was on the inside was the voice of God. And in that drought, God began to speak inside the soul or the spirit of man. What is God saying to your spirit?